As everyone is coming in, I would like to welcome everyone to the 2021-2022 Refuse to Use Kickoff, hosted by the Collaborative and featuring the incredible talent of Benjamin Lerner. I'm joined today by my wonderful colleagues at the Collaborative, our dedicated school representatives, as well as many other caring members of our community. But really, the most important people here are our young people, without which this program would not be possible. Now, before we begin our program, and as we're allowing people to sort of settle and come in from the waiting room, we want to allow some time. So we've created a playlist of last year's Refuse to Use participant artwork. In such an unprecedented and challenging time during COVID, we asked our scholars and their caring adults to focus on themes of connection, community, and resilience, while producing artistic and creative representations of those concepts. And the work is really fantastic, all while doing it virtually. And so we wanted to honor that. And so we're going to have about a 2.5-minute presentation of some of the artwork from last year. And sustained resilience is continuing to be one of the focuses of our programming this year. And we're so proud and encouraged by the youth in our community who truly know how to face and meet challenges. So please just sit back and enjoy reflections on resilience before our program begins. We are very grateful to have such talented youth in our midst. And that's just a very brief snapshot of some of the work that was created last year. Now, on to the main event. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie, and I'm the programs coordinator at the Collaborative, a small nonprofit located in Londonderry, Vermont, whose mission it is to promote the development of a healthy and involved community supporting substance-free youth. We are very grateful to have Benjamin Lerner kick off the 21-22 Refuse to Use program, which endeavors to provide our community with meaningful substance misuse and asset building educational opportunities in an effort to help support youth in their journey to live healthy and fulfilled lives. Normally, we would come together as a community in person. However, the health and safety of our community is of the utmost importance. Thus, we made a decision to pivot to virtual. This work of prevention is not easy. It is with the support of people like you, caring adults, community partners, preventionists, treatment specialists, members of the recovery community, teachers, scholars, etc., that we were able to do the hard work that it takes to provide substance use prevention education in Southern Vermont. We all have a part to play in supporting youth in our communities. We are humbled to play a part. We are humbled by your support. Together we are stronger. We thank you for being here. Now, we would not be here were it not for the phenomenal community partners in Stratton Mountain, Magic Mountain, Riley Rink, and Viking Nordic, where students receive a season pass for engaging in this meaningful work of substance misuse education. We'd also like to thank the numerous businesses, caring community members, and organizations that helped us create an entirely virtual program last year, which included over 330 scholars and their caring adults from local communities. And just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you are a refuse to use participant, your attendance for this event is going to be earned by responding to some brief follow-up questions that will be sent to you via email. If you have any questions, please send them into the chat. I'm joined this evening by Devin, our programs assistant, who is going to be helping out with technical difficulties or whatever questions you may have. And please remain muted during this event out of respect for the performer. There will be time at the end for questions and answers. So please, 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 if you would like to send them in the chat, by all means, go ahead and do so. But there will be time to send questions in the chat at the end. Now, it is my distinct honor to welcome Benjamin Lerner, a person living in long-term recovery from substance misuse disorder, and just an all-around amazing human being. Now, this is the first event of the Refuse to Use season, which is sure to be marked by hope, resilience, and helping our youth to understand that they are enough, just as they are. Benjamin Lerner is the great-grandson of Irving Berlin. He started writing poetry at the age of 8 and playing piano at the age of 9. A prodigy by 14, Benjamin was playing full classical concerts and also fell in love with rap music. However, the pressure of living up to the expectations of his family's musical legacy proved too much for him. Benjamin began using drugs and alcohol as a means of self-medication, and his life spiraled out of control. But there was hope. Benjamin sought help for his addiction in June 2016 and has remained sober ever since. Benjamin credits his continued success in recovery to his ability to express his emotions relating to struggle through word and song. He has developed a new hybrid genre, combining rap and classical piano. He creates all new piano compositions rooted in classical music theory and simultaneously raps over them, journaling his experience with addiction in life and sobriety. And he's an incredibly talented writer and writes a weekly column for the Vermont News Guide. And his first album, Clean Jams, came out in February of 2022, and a new song, Recovery is Possible, was just released recently to much acclaim. And we're also very honored to have Benjamin debuting a song, a brand new song, Living My Life, just for this event this afternoon. Now, Benjamin's great-grandfather created a vision of hope in the 20th century through his music. And similarly, Benjamin hopes that by sharing his personal journey through this hybrid rap of classical music, he can bring hope to others who are struggling. Now, we wanted this presentation to be of the highest quality this evening, so it has been pre-recorded specifically for this event, including a brand new song. But before we begin, however, we need to mention that there will be use of explicit language throughout this event. As you know, the collaborative believes in the importance of language. We use person-centered language in everything that we do, or at least we try our very best to, putting the human in the center of all things. So with this in mind, we also believe that creative license and expression are of the utmost importance. So just to prepare yourself for the presentation. Substance dependency has touched every single one of us in one way or another. Either you have struggled, you know someone who has struggled, or you are out there fighting the good fight to help address this insidious and pervasive disease of the mind, body, and soul. Together, we can make a difference. We are so honored to have one of those difference makers here to present this afternoon. Folks, it is an honor to welcome Benjamin Lerner.
Thank you so much for having me, Natalie. and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you to the Collaborative Refuse to Use program. And it's an honor for me to be here, and it's an honor and a privilege for me to be alive and sober, and every day counts, and sometimes it's every hour, every minute, every second. And so before I begin, I just want to take a moment to center myself in the here and now and the solution, because if I ever keep looking back to the way it used to be, and if I ever just completely stay in the moment, I lose sight of who I was, I lose sight of who I am now, and I lose sight of who I can be. And I'm going to touch on why that's important throughout tonight's program. But I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my experiences. Hopefully some of you can relate. Hopefully some of you can understand. And I'm just going to start off by saying that I fully believe that I had the tendencies of someone who suffered from substance use disorder before I ever took my first drug or drink. And what that means is that I was always seeking out an external solution to try to fix a hole that was inside. And as Natalie mentioned, my great grandfather was Irving Berlin, kind of a modern American classical composer at this point. He was born in the 1800s and he had his heyday in the 1920s, but a lot of his songs are still alive today. And, some of them are pretty famous. And I grew up with a lot of pressure, but I also grew up in a house with a lot of love. And people ask me, how did that emptiness come from? And the best way I can sum it up is that I never thought that I was good enough when I was young. It was kind of this darkness, this dissociative fog of not thinking that I was even worthy of basic, decent human happiness. Maybe it's the way that I was born genetically, physically, biologically. Maybe it's a mixture of that with mental health things or a spiritual condition, as they're referred to in sobriety fellowships, which I happen to be a member of today. But I always was desperate for approval. And, I was desperate for the approval of my peers, and I was desperate for the approval of my family. And I'm going to be referencing that quest for approval throughout tonight, because if I have to summarize everything I'm telling you, it's that, approval has to come from within. But I didn't know that that was possible in the beginning. I didn't know it was possible to feel okay about myself without the outside approval of other people. And eventually that led to self-medication. But before then, it started out when I was real young. Like they said, I started out playing classical piano when I was 9 years old. I started writing poetry when I was 8. And I came from a family of musicians and authors and poets. And beyond Irving Berlin, a lot of people, worked for magazines, worked for record companies, worked for different music schools. And, the same way, if there's a family of lawyers, a family of auto mechanics, a family of gifted high school or college quarterbacks with a sports legacy, there's that pressure to succeed in your lane, whatever it is. And my parents didn't really care if I succeeded in the exact same way that they did. They just wanted me to be successful in whatever I chose and uphold the family's legacy of, I'm going to call it, intellectual curiosity and kind of intellectual accomplishment. And so for me, what that meant in my context for searching for approval and for searching for some kind of hit outside of myself before there was ever even a chemical to make me feel like I was worthy of even existing, is that when I recognized that people would give me props or give me, approval or positive feedback from doing what I was doing, whether it was playing the piano or speaking out in a conversation with words that were smarter than my age, if you want to call it that, it gave me a high. And at first I thought, oh, this is nice. And I didn't realize that I was getting addicted to it. I didn't realize that it was becoming the backbone of my identity and that I wasn't forming on my own. But every time my parents praised me and every time, they made me feel like I was worthy, it gave me a little spark of electric lightning that made me want to keep going. And the same thing with my friends. And, I started playing pretty tough classical pieces early on. And I would get a high score at piano judging, and that would be another lightning bolt through the back of my spine, thinking I was good enough. And I want to make it clear, loving parents who encourage their children are wonderful, and I have nothing against that. And, in this world, you have to chase your passions and you have to follow it. And I want to make it clear that my parents gave me every privilege that I could ever ask for beyond any resource. They were there for me. They were loving. They did get divorced, a little bit of trauma, a little bit of a history of alcoholism in my family. But for the most part, they were there for me and they loved me every day. And I can't thank them enough. But within me, my personal hardwired interpretation of that approval cycle manifested to the point where I was getting high from that approval from my friends, from my family, from my community, every single time that I was playing it. And I wasn't playing these songs for my own pleasure. I wasn't conversing with people for my own pleasure. I was literally reading the patterns of their conversations and trying to understand how I could play that conversation to get the most approval. And Natalie mentioned in my album Clean, through Old Mill Road Recording and Old Mill Road Media, it came out in February of 2020. And the opening song from that album is called Performer. And it deals with this theme of performing, whether it's music or it's in conversations for approval, and just getting addicted to that loop of positive feedback before I ever touched a drink or drug. So I'd like to kick off with the event with the song tonight, Performer, so that you can understand what it was like for me growing up and understand that even before I ever picked up a drink or smoked a joint, I was addicted to the approval and the feedback from the people around me. So this is Performer off of my debut album, Clean.
I'm a performer, the world is a stage. Every conversation I have, a word that I say, pre-rehearsed inside my mind. I purposefully try to get approval from outside in an absurd little game. I was conditioned from a young age to performing on command, so I'm always trying to prove that I'm way smarter than I am. When I was barely speaking words and counting on my hands, my father told me concepts that were hard to understand. Wanted to be seen as someone special and unusual. The steps I missed in my mental development were crucial. I was in my adolescence feeling free and youthful. Had to go to dinner parties, I was introduced to lots of aging hippie baby boomers chewing Metamucil. 5 times older than I was, and if I'm being truthful, I was scared, intimidated. But while disintegrating on the inside, outside my eloquence was scintillating. But I was only recycling concepts and imitating other people I had listened to. Gave me inspiration. I learned to be a mimic, a cynic, a critic, an actor, a faker, a parrot, a gimmick. People told me I was smart, which made me arrogant and giddy. But inside I still felt empty, sad, terrible, and shitty. And when I started winning some piano competitions, my family started pressuring, vicariously living. I was performing my ways to one and spinning out of control. My mental health deteriorated quickly. I was under pressure and performing every minute, played the role of tortured prodigy. I got lost within it, and long before I ever had a drink, I was addicted to the rush I got from knowing people thought that I was gifted. Growing up with Asperger's, the social isolation made me use my set of acting skills. I was tired of waiting, a spectator on the side. I used to perform with pride, study social customs, then abandon all of mine. Learn to play a bunch of roles, switch up all the time. This created identity split and blurred, distorted lines. I didn't even remember who I was inside. That's the consequence when you're performing all the fucking time. I was playing different characters to run and hide, dealing with emotions hot and cold. Winter, summertime, pressure makes diamonds, makes you lose your mind as well. I was a barely formed child trying to find himself. I was broken inside with a shiny shell, hid behind a beam of smile, stuck inside a private hell.
So there I was, young kid, a lot of pressure situations. Some of the pressure's external and some of the pressure I'm putting on myself. But regardless, the common theme is that I think I have to jump through a series of hoops to be seen in a positive light. And by continuing to live through that mind state, it got me to the point where I thought that the only way that I could continue to move forward in my life trajectory and earn the respect of the people around me, whether it's my family or my peers, was to do the same things as they were doing. And I'm going to speak on my own personal experience now and let y'all know that apart from, call it substance use disorder, I personally refer to myself as an addict because I want to stay rooted in my past and understand that it's my responsibility to move forward. But as they said, language is important. Call it whatever you want. But in addition to substance use disorder, I also suffer from Asperger's syndrome, which is what we call dual diagnosis in the sobriety community, meaning that I suffer from more than one mental health issue. And before I got diagnosed, I never liked looking people in the eye. Separate from my thirst for approval, I never felt comfortable in social situations. The best way I can describe it is that there's this kind of sensory overload. Like whenever I hear music or I see one of the pictures that went on the slideshow in the beginning, it starts off a firestorm of activity in my brain that's part mental and part physical. And, when I was younger, I would literally put my, hands over my ears when I went out in public and closed my eyes because I didn't want to be exposed to that stimulus because it was so overwhelming. And the only time I ever felt that, brainstorm quiet down before I started using drugs and drinking was when I got approval from other people around me. And, I had had a sip of alcohol before at, a dinner party, kind of snuck it off the table in my parents' house, but I didn't know what it was doing. It was just innocent curiosity. And, when I first started drinking and I knew what it did, it was kind of like a breakthrough moment because I understood that I could use this destructive, poisonous chemical. And I want to say that because, at the time, I'll be honest, I don't want to even say I thought it was cool. I thought it was my solution. I thought that here's like a cheat code for like a video game analogy for something that can get me to skip over all of the development that I'm scared to do. Scared to build my ego up and, build my healthy ego up through my own practice, through my own continued resilience and perseverance and learning to talk to people around me and all that. No, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to do that work. And it's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm a bad person. It's because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of being seen. I'm afraid of being vulnerable. I'm afraid of, to make it even more meta, being seen as being afraid to be seen and vulnerable. And it just kind of built up in this snowstorm in my head. And the alcohol quieted it, but it came at a price. And the price was that, I started foregoing everything else that I cared about. Because once I realized that I could mute out the voice in my head with this poisonous chemical that would make me steal money out of my parents' purse, would make me stay out all night and not do what I wanted to do with my life. I was passionate about the piano, but I started giving that up. I was passionate about, running track in high school, started giving that up, started showing up high to track meets, placing further back, showing up high to judgings, placing further back. But I justified it by the fact that, my social anxiety was so bad that I thought I was justified in self-medicating. And my parents never put me on anything like Adderall or, a different medication. I know that's some people's stories and it's continuing like that, but I was my own, self-employed doctor, and I was poisoning myself more, making myself sicker by the minute. But not only did I feel I was justified, I thought that I was doing the right thing because I thought that if people could only know the amount of pain that I was going through, they would understand how much I was drinking and how much I was smoking. And at the time, the treatment community hadn't progressed to the time it has now. There was a lot of stigma. And, I started losing the approval of my family while I was gaining the approval of my peers. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but to me, what that looked like is, people would see me at a party and they'd be like, an innocent, not like a house party or anything like that, an innocent, like 8th or 9th grade birthday party. And they'd be like, oh, there goes Benjamin, like, hide all the other kids, like take him home. Like he's bringing alcohol, he's bringing weed, he's doing this. And that just kind of cemented the pattern. I felt isolated. I felt estranged. I felt like I didn't have any worth and I didn't have any value. And then I got to high school and there was kind of just this mind switch where all the kids started partying at the same time. And, there's a song, the second song on the album that kind of deals with the escalating consequences of my addiction that comes from the same search for approval that motivated me to want to perform in the song Performer, motivated me to want to seek out self-medication so I could feel that same electric feeling of self-approval. And the song's called Dan and Dave. And in Dan and Dave, it tells a story that has elements from my life and elements of a lot of people I knew. And I'll touch on this further on, but I lost a lot of friends to the disease of addiction. When I was growing up, in high school, I had people get consequences, and it was very sad. But more than anything in my life or anybody I know, the sad fact of the matter is that there are Dans, as you'll see, and Daves in towns all across America. And it starts out, as I say in the video, with just, I'm not going to be hyperbolic. I don't want to do scare tactics here. This isn't about singling anyone out for smoking weed or drinking. Not everyone suffers from the disease of addiction, but for people that do, like me, it started just with, trying to hide the feeling with alcohol and marijuana. And, a lot of my friends moved on and did other things, but I had a lot of consequences that occurred because of what happened on those nights when I was just trying to numb out the pain and not feeling good enough and get the approval of the people around me. So This is a little animated video that was storyboarded and directed by my boss, mentor, and friend, Josh Sherman, and his talented friend, Leonard Kenyon. And it's called Dan and Dave. And it's actually the first single that I released off of my album, Clean. And I hope y'all understand this and relate to it and maybe learn a little something from it. This is Dan and Dave.
Tell you a story about Dan and Dave, couple kids who knew each other and the similar paths they take. Only minor distinct differences separate two people who from outside would seem the same in every way. Dan was a rebel, raised in an environment where people had so much money, ain't worried about retirement. Palatial mansions, cars outside were fancy. His family adopted him, he was really the plan B. He grew up in a suburb with some other kids and never knew till he was older what his real father and mother did. He played soccer and his skills were way proper, but had a chip on his shoulder, started to blaze ganja. Didn't need the money, but he started selling it, cause drugs will give you power and respect, and so he relished it. Charismatic, magnetism, despair, he had it, but always had a grim aura as if aware a tragic circumstance awaited him. Real cautious and pessimistic, he always moved as if knowing he had his chance and missed it. And that's what Dave enters the picture, skinny and insecure, an introvert who's thrown into the mixture. His clothes were funny, the older kids laughed at him, wanted acceptance and started blowing cash rapid, stealing money from his family, acting out, using drugs and drinking. It started out with grams of weed, and at the parties where him and Dan would be, Dan saw Dave and realized he could hustle him handily. He made it come off like a friendship, and Dave was gullible. Soon he found himself faded and gone, entrenched in a way of life he didn't really understand, but he wanted approval from the older kids being the younger man. So got some ounces as a front from Dan, but didn't hustle with the same tenacity, and then fucked up the bands. Dan would brag about ripping them off with all his friends. They would all laugh, snicker and scoff like, "You really fronted Dave another zip of that bomb? Then he took 2 weeks to flip it, must've did something wrong." And they were right, Dave would take that shit and blaze every night, cause the demons in his head were way too crazy to fight. And Dan graduated, moved away, leaving Dave a marijuana addict, trapped inside a sad traumatic loopy haze. But in his absence, Dave improved his game and started hustling and stopped going to classes thinking school was lame. Somehow graduated too and stayed with just the weed and liquor for a sec, but then moved on to blues and yay. And then in college it got crazier still. Wasn't long till Dave was hooked on the cocaine and the pills. Dan started selling perks, so Dave copped them from Dan, who moved back home supplying Dave with his Dilaudid and Zans. Oxycontin caused Dave problems, but Dan didn't mind, cause while Dave was getting worse, Dan was managing fine. But when Dave left for rehab, wasn't his time, wasn't ready to give up what he discovered his mind needed to quiet down. He wasn't sober too long, stepped it up to heroin, then a hopelessly strong craving came on. That's when Dan came back in his life as a private school junkie, slanging smack in the white. And Dave would steal his mom's car and money out of a purse to go to Dan's house, buy some dope and powder and perks. Used to sneak it through the window on those dark cold nights in a suburban mansion basement in some dark low light. They used text message codes case cops found the phones. When Dan went to rehab, Dave was alone. And then when Dan got sober for a minute for real, Dave was dope sick, struggled for a fix and a pill. Started going up to Baltimore, up on his own. Copper scrambled from the block, far away from his home. But then one day a rolled up dollar just ain't do the trick, and one of Dave's homies told him it was better to stick a needle up inside his arm. Dave thought, what's the harm? When he pushed the plunger down, fell in love with the charm. Instantly he started spiraling downward so much faster. But Dan had moved away and became aware of his past, and for the first time in his life he met his real family. Left his adopted parents who considered him the plan B, whom he had disappointed with his drugs and his ways. He was down with his new family for a number of days. David moved on from Dan as the source for his dope, started smoking crack, losing weight, lost all control. His family gave up, he was crazy as fuck. Dan was on and off the needle, landscaping with trucks, trying to earn an honest buck, but that shit didn't last. Couldn't keep himself from hustling and forget about the past. So when Dave finally did his second stint in rehab, Dan came back to town again and started getting some cash. Found a girl who had connections to some real raw shit, supplying those who needed coke and dope they speedball fix. He would always try to flip it fast and re-up quick, but the clientele wasn't steady, Dan would need more chips. At this time, Dave had been sober for over a year, had a steady job, faced his inner soul and his fears. Dan was broker than a joke, heard that Dave had some cash and tried to tempt him with some heroin he had in his stash. And Dave said, can't buy dope, I ain't gonna lie, living different now, homie, been clean for a while. I hope life is treating you better than it did in the past, but if you're trying to sell me smack, I can't give you no cash. But Dan was desperate, he needed money, had to stack it, and so he told Dave to sell him a North Face jacket. And Dave said, forget it, this shit is just pathetic. But Dan talked him into it, and he knew that he'd regret it. But he got in Dan's car, Dan drove him around, reminisced about the days when they were smoking it down, when he used to cop Oxy 30s and coke in the brown, through basement windows in his house. But Dave was over it now. Dave bought the jacket out of pity for this miserable man, who used to seem so charismatic with the zips in his hand, who now was broken down on his luck, who didn't command that magnetism that he once did, who ditched all his plans. Dave didn't know it, but he would never see him again, cause Dan would end up being sentenced in the federal pen. A while later, Dave's homie hit him up on a text and told him there had been a crazy and momentous event. Dan had been arrested for spiking his dope with some fent and selling it to kids who overdosed and know he ain't meant to kill the kids. Dave was overwhelmed and couldn't believe the kid in high school who sold him all his coke and his weed, then sold him dope, sold him oxys in his lonely disease, was doing hard time resulting from his hopeless ass greed. I tell you this story now for just one reason alone. In an alternate universe, it would be me who'd be gone from shooting fentanyl-laced dope, casualty of the game. Every single day is precious, don't take it in vain. If you ain't figure it out, my friend is Dan and I'm Dave. Story true as it can be, only the names have been changed. I don't do this to embarrass or disgracefully shame former friend of mine to point out the mistakes that he made. I do this shit so other addicts who are escaping their pain don't end up rotting in a cell or being named on a grave.
Yeah, so that's where it took me. That's where it took a lot of my friends. That same quest for approval, that same quest to quiet the voices in my head telling me I wasn't good enough. And just a little bit more background on that. You know, I think the music video does a great job of summing it up, but there's nothing that can really summarize the feeling of what it feels like to wake up and feel like you're incomplete without a substance. And when I was growing up, all the, drug programs at schools, people would always tell me about how only bad people use drugs. And that's pretty antiquated. And it kind of made me feel worse about what I was already doing. So I'm going to keep it real. And I'm going to say this. I wasn't a bad person for using drugs. I was just a scared person, a lonely person, and someone who was struggling to figure out what he was doing with his life. And the drugs were a destructive shortcut that got me to a place that I could have got to on my own. I just didn't know how, and I didn't know how to ask for the help. And I was struggling to maintain my sense of social escalation because even though I had Asperger's, I had learned to study, the people around me to the point that I understood how to fit in better. And I grew up in a place, if you can't tell from my accent, I ain't from around here. I'm from the city, even though I used to spend a lot of time in Vermont growing up as a young man. And, it was very high pressure, and everybody kind of celebrated. Everywhere is high pressure in its own way, regardless of where you're from. But in terms of where I'm from, we celebrated together with these destructive chemicals. We got together, we drank, we smoked, and we forgot about the pressure for a while. But I could tell that they were a little bit different from me, because when the party was over, they went back to their normal lives, and my normal life was the party. My life, my full-time job was chasing that next high. And that's what separated me, is the chemicals became my identity. So what started out as me trying to connect with people while simultaneously numbing the voices that said I wasn't good enough, numbing that anxiety, numbing that need for an outside solution, it actually started to isolate me more from people. People started to get concerned about me because, I had gotten into college. I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth, but I still did manage to get a couple good scores on some piano judgings. And I have a couple of friends who did the same thing. And some of them, are living in addiction still, and some of them are living in recovery. And I'm very happy to have some of them alive with me today, but others weren't so lucky. And, the consequences for my addiction started out pretty suburban, like I said before. I would skip a piano judging or track meet, or I'd get bad marks on a test. But I don't want to get into what we call drugalogs too much, because everybody's story is different. I want people to be able to relate. But for me, I started getting arrested, started getting DUIs. I remember one of them, I drank a fifth of whiskey and I drove back, slept on the road, hungover when I woke up. Snowy morning in DC, nothing like the snow we got up here in Vermont, but still kind of sleeting on the road. And the only thing on my mind wasn't that I was putting people in danger when I was driving drunk on the highway. It wasn't that, I'd stolen my mom's car out of the driveway to go where I wanted to go, drive on the road to see my friends, to pretend that I was still in college like them, even though I had dropped out of college to use drugs and do what I was doing. But I get to this intersection and I'm going 15 miles over the speed limit. I make a left and I plow through the intersection and I smash into 3 other cars, to keep it real. And luckily no one was hurt. I had a bruised rib, but I didn't even go to the hospital until later when I had a doctor's appointment. I found out. But after I smashed into those cars, the first thing in my mind was not, is everybody else okay? Like, what happened to them? Oh my God, my family's gonna have to deal with this. I totaled their car. Like, I'm going to jail. My first thought was, I'm not gonna get to drink or use today. And I don't want to call it selfishness, but it was self-centered. Not in an egomaniacal way, but in a fearful way, in a, wow, I'm not going to be able to use my solution today. I'm not going to be able to numb myself today. And, my parents bailed me out. My mom bailed me out. Thank God she did. But I literally walked home, had my friends bring me what I needed. And, I didn't care. It was okay. But on the inside, I was crumbling. I was so scared. But I still had this destructive solution that made me let it go. And, I actually cleaned up my act for a little while then. Us addicts are good at that. We're good at dodging consequences and making it seem like we're okay by propping ourselves up with lies and substances. And it's not because, at least from my experience, that we're bad people. It's because we use the same energy that we could be putting towards good and to developing resilience and developing tactics to deal with the world towards our search for narcotics and alcohol and whatever it is, because I just didn't know a better way at the time. But I wanted to keep moving forward with my life. I had a budding rap career at the time. I had done tracks with Project Pat from 3 6 Mafia, Mac Miller, not to flex too much, just to let you know. I mean, I was pursuing my passions, but I could have gone so much further in that industry. If I had actually made that my drug and made that my method of fulfillment instead of the drugs themselves. And, I still have some, reservations and resentments for myself about the fact that I didn't do everything that I could do. But after that car accident, I went out to San Francisco, where my father had relocated after he got divorced from my mom. And I was so scared. I had a pending court case. And at this point, the alcohol and the marijuana and the other drugs had just kind of become like white noise in the background. Like they were a baseline that I needed to get through the day. They weren't fun anymore. It's like I needed to smoke 10 joints and drink whatever just to feel okay, get through the day and get 1/10 of that same electrified feeling I used to get in the beginning. And my quest for approval had become the same. Like when I first started making rap music, like I was okay just freestyling with my friends and putting a song out. But now if a song that I put out didn't get at least 20, 40, 50,000 YouTube views, that approval addiction was evolving at the same time that my substance abuse addiction was evolving. And I just wanted to be seen as this cool guy when in reality, I'm crawling into my mom's, bedroom to steal her credit card before I go back to college out in San Francisco to try to get away from my court case. I'm not this grandiose character I'm hyping myself up to be. I'm someone who's scared, afraid, and using drugs to cope because I don't want to develop resilience. I don't want to be seen, and I don't want people to understand that I'm in pain, and I don't want anybody to understand me because I think I'm not good enough. But I got out to San Francisco trying to lay low. And, I stopped drinking, managing consequences, trying to get my family thinking I'm doing the right thing. But at that point, I got my wisdom teeth removed about 2 weeks there. And, part of my spiritual program in recovery, I like to think that everything happens for a reason. But to this day, I do not understand the reason I had to experience this. I pray no one ever has to experience this because I would not wish what happened to me next on my worst enemy. And like I said before, I try not to get too much in fear tactics and hyperbole, because I like to let the facts of my life speak for themselves. But when I first got prescribed opioids for my pain, that was the one line I swore that I was never going to cross. I was never going to take pharmaceutical drugs, because I had this kind of like fake perception of myself in my head. Like, yeah, I grew up, I went to a good school. I went on nice vacations. My family provided for me. I'm an uptown pothead. I'm a, up and up coke dealer. I'm a, high bottom, low bottom alcoholic, meaning that, like, even though I have low consequences like DUIs, I'm still in a nice place. Like, I haven't lost my home. And I did all these delusions in my head and kind of anything to keep myself going on this negative path and justify it so that I didn't have to face myself. But I started taking these pills, and they told me, you can't smoke pot and you can't drink, because drinking will mess with the surgery, and any act of inhaling anything or, drinking something out of a straw, even the suction will pull the clots out of, the sockets from your tooth extraction. It'll give you something called dry socket, which is incredibly painful. But they gave me another solution. And this solution was infinitely more destructive and infinitely more addictive. My alcohol and marijuana addiction took me about 6 years to get going to the point where I needed it to get out of bed. This was about 6 weeks. And, I was down on the streets of San Francisco. I had an apartment because I had conned my family into it, but I was living like a homeless person. I had holes in my sneakers, holes in my sweatpants, holes in my shirt. I had started smoking crack within a year and a half. I was in and out of rehab centers, in and out of outpatient rehab centers on Suboxone, the whole 9 yards, shooting dope, smoking crack, you name it, I did it. And not just the drugs, but the consequences got worse and worse. And even though I was searching for approval through my music, searching for approval, the people I started searching for approval from weren't the same people that I sought it from in the beginning. My family didn't matter anymore. My old friends who were worried about me, even some people I used to drink and smoke with, they were like, my nickname used to be Skinny, it still is. I don't discount the past. There's a thing, neither regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I'm still that same Skinny from the street, even though I go by Benjamin Lerner right now. But my friends would say, Skinny, are you okay, man? Like, you don't look so good. You've lost like 50 pounds. So you got track marks on your arms. You need to cool out. But I just wanted the approval of the new people I was hanging out with. And I felt I was justified. And I thought there was some kind of, disgusting romance to what I was doing. And, I'm going to be honest, there is nothing romantic, and there is nothing cool, and there is nothing appealing, sorry to keep it real, about lancing abscesses and picking quarters and half-smoked cigarettes off the street so that you can get your nicotine fix, and so you can get the money slapped out of your hand by a crack dealer in broad day with little school kids walking by and laughing at you just because you made the decision when you were 9 years old, which is escalated to now, to seek out approval and seek out comfort through an external solution and not from within. And I want to make it clear that, I'm not saying any one specific event led me to that point. And I'm not saying I was a bad person for getting there. And I have friends who are still out there. I don't think they're bad people. I just think they have that same fear that I had that was holding me back from asking for help, holding me back from living without needing other people's approval, and holding me back from living my life and living my truth. And it took me to some incredibly dark places, but thankfully there was a light at the end of the tunnel when I chose for there to be. And that brings me to the next set of songs. And this is the middle of the album. And, this is after a song called I Surrender. And my boss actually worked with me on this because we wanted to tell the story of the family and how it had an impact, because addictions, it's a family disease. And honestly, I think it's a community disease with a community solution, which is why I'm so happy for what Refuse to Use is doing, putting this list of different principles and values together, which you're going to hear in the song later on. But, at this point, my mom had surrendered to the fact that my disease was something that she couldn't control, and she couldn't send me to treatment. And so the song before that, she actually sang that song on the album. And she's in recovery now too, even though she struggled with alcoholism. And I'm blessed because she was able to get me into that treatment center, and I had that privilege. Not everybody gets that privilege, but I was ready. And so after I Surrender, we get to these next three songs: Alive When I Die, Broken, and Never Let It Go. And it's about my last days out there in the streets shooting dope, sad, lonely, scared, cold, not thinking anything's possible to ever live in a different way. And then, there's that moment where I think maybe there's a chance, because the drugs didn't get me high anymore. It was just an infinite loop of suffering. And I thought maybe there's a chance that I can learn to live a different way. And so that's what Broken is when I have the epiphany, and then Never Let It Go tells the story of how I got through detox and rehab. And let me tell y'all, this is no cap, this is no exaggeration. Opioid detox and alcohol detox is not fun. It is not fun. It is not games. And I'm grateful that I got through it, but I would not wish it on anybody else. So I hope you guys listen to these and understand where I'm coming from. And I hope it makes sense and that you can relate to it. This is Alive When I Die, Broken, and Never Let It Go, off of my debut album, Clean.
Feels like I already died in my mind. I'm through with living, I just wanna get high. I can't even look my mom in her eyes. Now my friends all say I constantly lie. What's the point of even wanting to try? I'm just trying to survive, feeling like I gotta constantly hide. But when the needle hits my vein, I'm alive. Talk to God and He's kind. All the levels of my conscience align. Take the pain and push it all to the side. There's a comfort in pause, where all the misery and suffering dissolves. Makes me feel like there ain't nothing that's wrong. I can live with myself, I can bathe in self-forgiveness and melt. Forget about how I've been lately stuck living in hell. Forget about the tears my family cries. Forget about the dirty, hopeless way I'm living that they have to deny. Forget about all of my cash and my pride, how they both are gone. Fuck it, nothing really matters after I die. Everything is a game. Today I had to cop a fix in the rain. Had to give my dealer nickels and change. He looked at me like a bitch in a lane. Went home, boiled the water, dropped the cotton in the mixture and strain. Took me 20 minutes hitting my vein. On my phone, got some more money, then I went and did it again. I've been stuck in a loop. I don't ever want to deal with the truth. I don't want to feel what feelings can do. I just want to feel the peace and the quiet. I don't want to desire. I just want to fucking sleep and be tired. I only ever feel alive when I'm high. So if getting high is killing me, I only feel alive when I die. I was cooking crack cocaine just to mask my pain. But then I start to feel an actual change when I was digging with a spike in my arm. Even though when blood would register, it felt a little light, little warm. I didn't feel I was enlightened through God. Didn't get that spiritual sense of relief I used to find way before. My nose was stuffed up. My sinus hurt from tears that I swallowed. I barely slept at all that night, stuck in fear of tomorrow. I woke up and thought the last night was only a fluke. I prepped a fresh rig, shot 2 bags of dope up for proof. And when I pushed that plunger down, I had some hope it would do what it had done before, make me feel my soul was renewed. That's when I knew it didn't do the trick anymore. I almost lost it in that motel, almost kicked in the door. And then I broke down. I thought, how the fuck am I gonna cope now? I'm scared of getting clean, but I don't get high off of dope now. But I'm too scared to cop me a pistol and even blow out my brain that maybe now there's finally no excuse to hold out. So I called the treatment center, said I wanted to go. I ain't gonna flex like I was ready, wasn't ready for show. The truth is I ain't never think that getting sober would work. But I was tired of lying, fucking people over with words, just to cop some crack or bars or coke or dope or some perks. Started to think of all my family I knowingly hurt. Left my home, drove 2 hours. On the road I was there, searching for something that could get me through my broken despair. I woke up feeling like my soul's missing, skin crawling, bones itching, legs shaking and my toes twitching, sweating bullets and it's cold dripping. Feels like it's been about 3-4 days, every 3-4 minutes. Feeling drained and my eyes heavy, but my heart is racing, I'm beyond restless. My stomach's turning every 5 seconds. Time stands still, mind can't chill even for a minute. Nerve and it's coming back to life, tell you how it feel. Every sense at once, coming back from numb. Heart beating fast, pounding like a drum. Finally feel like I ain't gotta run. I accept my fate, take it as it comes. Sensitive to light, eyes tearing up, sneezing like I got an allergy to dust. Doubled over like I'm limping with a crutch. Seconds turn to hours, hours turn to months. I ain't eating none, breakfast, dinner, lunch, skipping every one. Barely even slept, feeling faint and light. I feel short of breath, coming back to life, feeling like I'm dead. Feeling like a mile every step, onward though I press. Nothing left, I lost everything I never thought I'd lose. Everything to gain, everything to prove. I feel like I'm lost and exhausted, disoriented and confused. Guess I finally gotta pay the cost and satisfy my debts and settle all my dues. Taking every ounce of strength I have to get up out the bed, get across the room, flick the light, splash some water on my face. This is something that I never thought I'd do. I still feel afraid, but I feel the weight shifting off my shoulders. Now I start to face every single doubt, every single fear. Finally aware, everything is clear. Here and now, seeing how weakness now turns into strength. Voices in my head speaking loud, I ain't listening to them. Broken down, but I know I got a chance to build it up again. This my chance at a new beginning. I'm deciding how it ends. Pain motivates, ain't gonna wait, ain't no debate. Make no mistake, gas never breaks, can't hesitate. Present, future, and the past separate. Lonely and I'm cold, sober and alone. Far away from home and everything I know. I'ma take the way I feel right now, remember it, and I'ma never let it go. I'ma never let it go. I'ma never let it go. I'ma never let it go.
So now when that song ends, after all the pain I've been through, you know, streets of San Francisco, streets of New York, picking up change, crack rocks, lancing abscesses, fun stuff like that, I was actually finally ready. And like I said, I had been to treatment before, but it wasn't for me. It was to gain the temporary acceptance of my family, not in my normal quest for approval like I did with my piano performance pieces or my performing in conversations when I was a young kid, or a quest for approval like me putting out a fancy song with a fancy rap feature where I'm not even the main attraction, but at least I'm getting views and I'm getting that little hit, like same as you get whenever you get a Facebook notification on your phone, that little endorphin dopamine rush that makes me, you know, think I was good enough. No, that was a different type of approval. I wanted my family to get off my back so I could keep using the destructive solution that was preventing me from moving forward with my life. But like I said before, I got so sick and tired of going through the same cycle. Like there's only so much dope you can shoot, to put, not to put too fine a point on it, only so much drugs you can put in your system before it just becomes background noise that doesn't even address the root of the problem. And I was getting high, but I wasn't getting spiritually or emotionally high anymore. And that's what that song Broken talks about in that last set. And then I got to a point where I was ready to go to treatment, and not just ready to go to treatment to get my family off my back. I was ready to go to treatment to actually see if, even though I didn't think it was going to work, I was so tired. I was tired of running, tired of stealing, tired of conning, tired of burning bridges with my friends. But more than any of that, I was tired of looking for an external solution to an internal problem. And, you know, it's not easy finding the solution from within. And the crazy thing about it is, I thought that I had to do all the work to get to a point that I was willing to live in the solution, but that's not the case. I just had to be willing to accept that I was powerless over my own addiction, my own tendency to hate myself and to self-medicate and to take the temporarily easy but long-term hard, destructive, and painful way out. And, you know, I had some experiences in treatment, talking with people, detoxing, that brought me to a place where I was finally ready to put a couple principles into practice. And I'm not taking credit for this. It's not like the sky opened up and it just hit me with this list. I had to learn them through, solid experiences without the aid of chemicals and without the aid of approval. Because at this point, I didn't get the same hit of approval I got when I played a fancy piano piece when I was young. My family was looking at me like, damn, look at him. He's got some work to do. So I didn't get that approval. It was all skepticism, but I knew it was time to make a difference. And the first step was humility. And, that's a big word with an even bigger meaning. But the way I look at it, it's not like, oh, I'm humble, I submit, I'm a servant, I don't have any power myself. It's like, I don't know everything, but that's good. Like, I used to think I needed to know everything so that when I was in a conversation, people could look up to me. They could worship me. They could think I was like, the coolest ever, that I was an authority on stuff that I didn't know anything about. And I would skim through like articles on stuff so I could just like insert a little tidbit in the conversation so I could win the conversation. And I would try to do the same things at sobriety fellowship meetings. If you can't see by now, I like to talk and I'm not ashamed of it, but I learned that, it's more important to listen, especially when people know more about something than you do. And I didn't need to pre-rehearse scripts in my head at meetings and pre-rehearse scripts when I'm talking to people in my recovery fellowship and my family and my friends the same way I had done for so long. And it wasn't that like, anything good came of it. It was just more work for me. And that's another thing I want to touch on, is that addiction is hard work. For anybody who says addicts or alcoholics are lazy, I don't know who you're hanging out with, unless someone won the lottery or something. I had a $300 a day heroin habit. That didn't come from nowhere. It came from me putting in the work to burn bridges and do destructive things. But then I thought, listen, there's got to be some way I could put that energy towards a positive solution. And I thought it couldn't be that simple. And then I heard, it was either a treatment counselor or someone in my fellowship say, if you can put 10% of the energy you put into trying to get out of working into working, you'll work 90% less hard. And it didn't quite click with me until, I started applying that principle of humility. And I started realizing that instead of putting the effort in to close myself off from the intelligent, wise words of people who were further along than me, I realized I was actively trying to not listen to them, actively trying to shut their advice out because I thought I was better than them. But at the same time, I thought I was 10 times worse than them. It was kind of like this crazy opposite end dichotomy of like, I'm the worst person in the world, but I'm also God. And at the same time, 10 times better than you, because I didn't want to listen to them. But at the same time, I craved their approval. But I just took a deep breath one day and I said, it's okay. Just listen. And I heard someone say at the end of their share in a fellowship meeting, they're like, stay calm and await further instruction. And that's what I did. I learned to listen. I learned to, take advice from people, and not everybody, I didn't put everything out on the table because, I was still not practicing the second principle, which was honesty. And there was a moment where, I wasn't telling everybody that I was in active recovery because I didn't want them to know. Because we're talking about that vulnerability piece, and the same thing I said, wanting to dominate the conversation, wanting to be the person who's on top, the person who's respected, the person who's loved, so I can get that hit of approval the same way I'm getting a hit of heroin, the same way I'm getting a shot of alcohol, I'm getting a shot of endorphin and dopamine, thinking that I'm the bomb. And I can only do that if I don't let people see my weakness, my vulnerability, and if I convince them that I'm strong and I don't need any of their help, right? But when you're trying to get your life back and you're trying to live in a sustainable way and develop strength outside of a chemical or outside of codependency or instant gratification, you got to be willing to be honest, because true strength lies in honesty. And that's what I learned when I was working at this restaurant, and I had track marks all up and down my arms from using, those are literal scars. And I had scars in my heart from not thinking I was good enough and from running and gunning for so long out in, active addiction. And I didn't want people to see either. I didn't want people to be able to look in my eyes and see my vulnerability. I didn't want people to look in my arms and see my scars. But one day it was too hot, 6 months sober or something, working at this busboy job. in DC. And, you know, there's all of these, you know, wealthy, condescending people giving me garbage about not doing their bread and their water fast enough. I'm hating myself. That self-hatred is there like never before. And I'm sober, so I can't self-medicate to get around it. But then I drop a plate because my hands are too sweaty. We got just like this, you know, shirt I got on. We had the same, and like a big black vest, and it was super hot, 95 degrees and sunny. And so I go inside and I'm getting another loaf of bread and I roll my sleeves up and I got all these scars, but I'm like, screw it. I don't want to lose my job. And then I'm hoping just no one says anything, because I'm talking, these are former abscess sites, like gnarly. And of course, within 3 minutes, a server comes up to me and she says, "Hey, what's up with those scars?" And I froze for a minute because I knew I had a very big decision to make. I was aware of the stigma surrounding addiction. I didn't want to lose my job. It was for a corporate restaurant. And I, more than that, or my job, like I just didn't want to be honest. Like my reflexive move was lying because I thought it was easier. And then I thought about all of the lies I would have to tell after that lie. I was going to say I was in a knife fight. No, that's no good. That's criminal. Oh, I had surgery. No, that's no good. What did I have surgery for? And all of the subsequent lies I would have to tell. And in the same way earlier, I said I realized that, you know, it's less work to not close myself off than it is to close myself off to everything around me. I realized that it was going to be less work to tell the truth than it would be to lie. And that didn't make sense to me for the longest time. I thought I lied because it was less work, but I was like, what am I going to have to do? That's exhausting. I'm tired. I was tired of using drugs. I was tired of running, but I was also tired of running from the truth. I knew it was time to run towards the truth. And so I told her, I'm an addict in early recovery. You know, I know, you know, I don't know if you have people in your family. I'm sorry if anyone's ever hurt you from addiction, but I'm trying every day. You know, I'm in treatment, outpatient treatment. This job is supporting me in my recovery, and I want to keep, you know, moving forward and doing what I'm doing. And I'm expecting her to lash out and give me all this anger, because I still feel like I deserve that anger and I deserve that hate, and I don't deserve that love. I don't deserve anybody's approval. But she met me with encouragement. And she said, "Good for you, kid. Keep it up." And it's little moments like that, you know, from other people that wouldn't have happened. Like if I had lied to her and just said that I wasn't an addict, I would have never gotten that little, like, you know, smidgen of good approval. And it wasn't approval because I was good at something. It wasn't approval because I was cool or I was like dominating a conversation or playing a good piano piece. It was approval because I was honest and I had done the right thing. And that was a feeling I had never experienced before. And that led me to the next 3 principles, which is when you're honest and you're humble, you start to understand that, weirdly enough, from like telling the truth and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, I started feeling like I deserved some of the things I didn't think I deserved for so long, because it was kind of like a vicious cycle. I would tell lies and then I would feel bad about the lies and think I didn't deserve to tell the truth because I didn't want to let people down. But I started taking care of myself. I started really going to those fellowship meetings. I went back into therapy. And I started taking care of other people too, taking care of my mom, who had, you know, been there for me, you know, going into treatment, taking care of my dad, flying out when he had heart surgery and being there for him. The same guy who used to hand me $20 that he thought was going to food, but was really going to heroin when I was out in San Francisco, and being there and like, you know, treating him to lunch with, I don't got that much money, but just like, you know, even if it's just a sandwich with my busboy job money, being there for him and being like, I'm here for you now. So that self-care piece and taking care of others too. And that goes into the 4th principle, which is accountability. I learned how to be there for people, but I also learned how to be there for taxes. I was 24 years old. I had never paid taxes because I had never had a job. My job was burning bridges, shooting dope, smoking crack, conning my friends, conning my family, which is a full-time job, but the pay ain't that great. And any pay that you do get goes directly into your arm or into your mouth through a bottle. So that's not the best perks package. And I learned how to pay taxes. I learned how to go to a job every day and show up on time, not for my bosses, not to try to make them happy, not for my family, for me. I was accountable to myself, and that allowed me to be accountable to other people. And all of those 4 converged into one last value, which is resilience. And I think this is especially important now during the coronavirus pandemic. And, you know, it's at a different state, it's fluctuating up and down. I'm not a doctor. Shout out Dr. Joshua Sherman, my mentor. Maybe he has something more to say about that, although I wouldn't quote him on that because, you know, it's a hot button issue. But, you know, everybody's at a different place. But for me, it brought me back to when I was an addict because, you know, for the first week when no one knew what was going on, I had just released my album in February of 2020, March 2020. The whole country shut down, and I was cut off from my recovery fellowship. I couldn't go to meetings, and I had moved up to Vermont. I had gotten back into music. I kind of glossed over that whole thing, but I'll talk a little more about that after the next song. But I was in a place in my life where I was finally employed doing what I love to do. I was in the place I wanted to be. I had built back trust with my family. I had put the work in. I was 3.5 years sober, and I had just put out an album telling the story of my life, and I couldn't play. We had gigs set up. We had festivals in the works that we were going to play at in all kinds of different states. I had just gone down to this opioid summit and talked to them, telling my life story, and had, Congress people and heads of companies, not to flex too much, but it's just surreal. Do you know where I am? I used to shoot dope. I used to rob people, like all this stuff. And 2 months after that, 3 months after that, it's all gone. And I'm back in a lonely room all by myself with all my tools gone. And it's just me. And I got enough money to use. I got enough money to drink and go to the liquor store and do all that and just lose it. And I'll be real. I didn't drink, but I wanted to. I didn't shoot dope, but I wanted to. And a lot of my friends did. And several of them relapsed and died. And I was in a really dark place. And then I did the most important thing that I ever did, which is I realized that resilience is an action and not a quality. And I realized that I needed to reach out to someone because my network was my strength. And my resilience wasn't just like, I can do 10,000 mental push-ups and not drink out of my own volition and my self-will. Nah, I need to check in with someone and I need to see where I'm at. I need to be honest with them. And that was the strength and the resilience. That act of being open with myself, being honest with myself, being humble enough to reach out, being accountable enough to someone around me, that was the strength. And that's what got me through. And that's what inspired me to write this next song, which is co-sponsored by Old Mill Road Media and the Vermont Arts Council. Shout out to them for the grant. I wrote this, a year into the pandemic to talk about my experiences and how I was able to talk to someone with a little more sober time than me who was working a good program and was connected to Zoom meetings. And he helped me get out of my funk when I almost relapsed. And I then took the lessons he had given me and helped somebody else. And then I saw them help somebody else. And I'm going to leave y'all with this before I play it. In the same way, addiction and, self-harm and all of those behaviors can, spread throughout us and spread throughout communities. It's also possible for hope to spread. I know that might sound corny, but it's also possible for hope and resilience to spread. And all it takes is one kind action and one good action on behalf of the person who's struggling and the person who helps them, and we can keep it moving. So with that, this is Recovery is Possible, and thank you for listening.
Recovery is possible. I'll make that clear from the beginning, cause we're fighting a battle that not everybody is winning. The opioid epidemic's a national curse, and the coronavirus made it even worse. I remember back in 2020, when I had first heard the news that they had locked the country down, and I was feeling so confused. I was 3 years clean, and I was living pretty well. But as the days passed, I started drifting into hell. The weeks turned into months, and I was restless in my room, despondent and resentful in my self-inflicted gloom, trying to pay attention in a meeting over Zoom. The walls were closing in just like a claustrophobic tomb. I'll keep it real, I contemplated using again, but I humbled myself down and I reached out to a friend. And then he took away the power from the voices in my head when I listened very closely as he said that recovery is possible. You're never destined to fail, and you don't have to waste away in institutions and jail. As long as you got your heartbeat and your breath, every day you get a chance to choose your life over your death. I hope that everyone who's struggling can overcome their pain so they can learn to find the love within. I do this for the ones who never made it. I'll never stop till everyone's persuaded that recovery is possible. Being honest is not an easy task, especially over distance when you're behind a mask. But still I saw the light and had a true epiphany. Started paying forward all the strength my friend had given me, reaching out to newly sober addicts on a daily basis, talking through the camera, saw the pain in their faces. They would tell me how they just had lost somebody that they knew, who had overdosed and died, or who was in the ICU. And I saw several of them blossom, facing their troubles. There's no feeling like watching someone whose clean time doubles from a day to 2 to 4, then a week and even more, as their sense of self returns stronger than ever before. It gave me hope to see them come back from the depths of their sickness, and I'm grateful for the miracles that I got to witness. Cause the same people who came to me to ask me what to do are now spreading the message, helping others too. Because recovery is possible. You're never destined to fail, and you don't have to waste away in institutions or jail. As long as you got your heartbeat and your breath, every day you get a chance to choose your life over your death. I hope that everyone who's struggling can overcome their pain so they can learn to find the love within. I do this for the ones who never made it. I'll never stop till everyone's persuaded that recovery is possible. You're never destined to fail, and you don't have to waste away in institutions and jail. As long as you got your heartbeat and your breath, every day you get a chance to choose your life over your death. I hope that everyone who's struggling can overcome their pain so they can learn to find the love within. I do this for the ones who never made it. I'll never stop till everyone's persuaded that recovery is possible.
So yeah, the title and the hook of that song, it's just 3 simple words: recovery is possible. And I think that in the context of addiction, it's certainly true, but I also think that kind of applies to recovery from a lot of things. Because when I did get sober, I had to understand that my addiction came from several things that I didn't want to face. Trauma, mental health considerations, and just a repetitive pattern, even outside of my chemical use, of just being thirsty for approval, looking to outside solutions. And that cycle is hard to break, but it is possible. And I had to ask some people for help along the way. And even though it wasn't their approval in terms of, I don't want to say getting high, but getting my juice off of what they thought about me. There's a difference between searching for approval and earning trust. And for me, it started out with, after I got sober, like I said, I got that job at that restaurant. And as long as I just, kept moving forward and kept moving towards that truth that I had learned about honesty, humility, resilience, I was able to keep doing what I was doing and live my life in the process while organically growing. And I'm not saying, I'm fully developed and fully formed now, but that's okay. That's the whole point, is that it's an ongoing process. Is this where I want to be forever in terms of my, spiritual state, emotional state, even physical state? No. I mean, I never want to go back to using a substance. That's not what it is. But I want to continue to keep growing and keep moving forward. And it's amazing how, I don't want to say recovery is directly responsible for the good things happening in my life. It just brought me to a place where I was able to move forward with courage and clarity that I hadn't had before. And it's not me. It's what I learned from other people who did it before me. And I was able to, move up in the job. It was, nothing big, no flex, but just like little things, like, working another spiritual step with the person I worked with in my program. Which allowed me to, be honest with other people, make amends to other people, try my hardest to become a better person. And even if you're never a member of a recovery fellowship, what that means is just being honest, just being accountable. And I hate to keep going back to that like a chorus and a busted refrain, like a busted music box, but it just took different manifestations in different areas. Like at work, like, we had a tip jar, and I could have reached my hand, cash tip jar. You know how much I would have loved it if I was an addict and there was just a bunch of money placed in front of me? It would have been like I won the dang Super Bowl. Nah, because instead of getting high off of the money in that jar, I got high off the fact that I ain't have to reach my hand in there because that wasn't where I was at. And, I work with people. I was a bartender in recovery. I have some stories I could tell that would be its own special, but I won't go there. But, there was this moment where my friend who struggles with cocaine dependency. Great guy, wonderful guy, but he came out, and he was very drunk and he was very high and he was trying to connect with some customers. And he was so in that oblivious state of self-centered fear that I used to be in. And I wanted to help him. But, there was just a little voice that says, stay in your lane, do your thing, keep washing those dishes and those glasses. And, what was crazy is at that point, I had gotten to a place where I wasn't quite as starved for approval, but just seeing him in his place of being starved for approval in the same way, it wasn't like peer pressure. I don't want to say that. But when I saw the manager come over and cringe at him, right? And it took me back to that place. And I felt his pain is my own and his lack of approval and his need for approval is my own. And it got me to a point where, I'm not going to say I wanted to drink or I wanted to go back to my old ways, but it got me stuck in a place where all of those old habits and old fears started coming back. And that's when I realized to practice a sixth principle, which was healthy detachment. And I love the guy, but I couldn't save him. He had to do the work on his own. If he ever asked me to come to a fellowship meeting or asked me to be part of the solution, I had to know, he asked me to come out with him, to the bar. And I was like, what do I need to go to a bar for? And I didn't. But at a different point in my life in the earlier years, when I was starving for approval, I would have done it just because I didn't want to let them down. And, they asked me to do things behind that bar, illegal things. And I had to let them down. I had to say, that's not where I'm at right now. And I wanted their approval so badly, even though I had learned that wasn't it. But what I'm saying is, when you make a decision to change your life, there's not always going to be a big ticker tape parade that happens. Like, just because I got sober doesn't mean that people are handing me out like job opportunities and all this stuff just on the strength of my recovery. Just because I'm not thirsty for approval anymore doesn't mean I'm going to get all of these cash and prizes handed to me. What it means is that when difficult situations come up, I'm not stressed. I'm not like in that crazy situation where I feel the need to be the constant people-pleasing mediator that solves everything. Do I still have people-pleasing tendencies? Absolutely. I see people getting in an argument on the street. I'm a peaceful person. I want to solve it. I see people not getting along. I always want to play devil's advocate on both sides and bring them together. But when I can detach from that and just be like, it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to treat myself like I'm the important person here, even, and still have deferential respect for other people, because it's a real balance. It's like, how do I look out for myself without harming other people? And I used to think it was so complicated, but now what it is, it's just living my life. And I know that sounds so simple, but just like staying in my lane and doing what I have to do on a daily basis to reach out to people for help, ask for help when I need it, put in the work when I know it's time, show up. When I volunteered at the treatment center in my community, the same one I had gotten sober at, that gave me so much, fulfillment. When I volunteered and gave some extra clothes of mine to people who I knew needed it, it felt good. And the crazy thing about giving is, I don't want to say giving selfish, but the little hit of endorphin, the same as you get from approval, you can get that from giving. You can get that from helping out other people. And I will say it, there is a selfish side to giving, because I feel good about myself when I do it. I don't feel like I'm the greatest person in the world. I'm just giving my time. I'm not giving my resources. It's not like me showing up with a big bottle of expensive tequila to the party where it's an extension of my material worth and I'm only cool because I have it. Nah, it's like I'm showing up and I'm humble and I'm focused and I'm giving my all to this effort that's going to not just help me, but help other people. And that community piece is also really important, because when I was in recovery working at that bar in DC, y'all might be wondering how a DC boy like me ended up in Vermont. And like I say, I've been coming here since an early age. My dad built a house up in the 70s in Sandgate. But just from showing up and just, I'm not going to lie, I was a little stagnant in my thing in DC. I worked at the bar for a couple of years. It paid well, got me a car, got me, a decent apartment, got me back with my family. But I took some time away from music and just to focus on my life. And I wanted to get back into it, but I didn't know how. And my dad, gift of the program, gave me this house. He said, you can pay taxes on it now. You got a steady job. Let me give it to you. And he's getting on. He's in his 70s. He didn't want to schlep over from California and deal with it. So he gave it to me. And, it's a blessing and it's a lot of work. It's way up in the woods in Sandgate. Doesn't even have a septic or anything like that, but it's fun and it's a lot of hard work. And I was up there fixing it a couple years ago, and a friend of mine introduced me to a man named Dr. Joshua Sherman, who runs this studio, Old Mill Road Recording in East Arlington, Vermont, and also, owns and distributes several magazines under Old Mill Road Media. And Vermont Magazine, Manchester Life and Stratton locally, Berkshire Magazine, and Vermont News Guy, which prints my clean column. And I'm grateful to be able to write that column today. But before the column, it just started with me being willing to share my story. I didn't think I would come up and get like an arts residency. I didn't think I'd be able to move to Vermont. I wanted to, but I didn't think it was possible. But just by being honest with him and telling my story, I was able to get a recording session out of it. And I had been developing, two sides of myself got to get integrated. Just from me being sober, I got to integrate the piano and the rap thing. When I was using, I thought like my music was dope, but I wasn't able to have the clarity to bring the two sides of myself together. And I had been working on it, and, it just lined up. And within 4 months, just keep coming back, same way I did to the sobriety meetings, keep coming back to the studio, keep coming back to Vermont. And, I came up here, I did my arts residency, and within a year, just showing up for the studio, showing up for my commitments, I got a job at the magazines. And I had no qualifications as a magazine writer. I'd written for a blog before. I've always been a passionate writer who's been decent at it. But, the trust that I earned with Dr. Sherman allowed me to move forward. And I also want to give a special shout out to him and every other person who offers people recovering from addiction and trauma a chance at a job. Because one of my main platforms, and if there's anyone here listening that, it serves in a managerial role where they can hire someone, not enough gets said about people who are willing to give recovering addicts a chance at life. And that means not just treatment. Treatment is great, but it doesn't end there. It's getting a job, getting a place to live, finding purpose and passion, a way to channel that. And Dr. Sherman gave me that. And more than any, salary or any like cool recording studio with a picturesque piano and that beautiful river going out there and all the gorgeous glass panels and wood beams, bigger than all of that, it's like I have a chance to do what I love to do, and I have a chance to do it sober. And when I say I have to go to a meeting, he understands. When I say I'm gonna get this clean column to you 6 hours late, he said once to me, he said, I would rather have the column 6 hours late than you 6 hours dead because you didn't make it to a meeting. Go, you need to go. And that's why it's important to make connections with people who care about you and people who understand you and don't just see you as someone, an extension of their worth. Because I have a lot of people, they were good people who I knew when I was using, but we're not in contact now. And I love those people and I got nothing wrong with them, but we were just a means to an end for each other, even though we had similar interests and all that. And like I say, nothing but love and respect and appreciation for them. But it's funny how all those people that I thought I was afraid of losing just by the wayside when I got sober, they just went away. So don't be afraid to set those boundaries, and don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. And don't be afraid to put yourself out there when the time comes and the chance comes. Because I was just living in the solution in recovery. And by working with Dr. Sherman, we've been able to accomplish some amazing things. The clean columns, the clean album, the clean jam show on WEQX. I mean, it's crazy. Like, that's a rock station. But, why would they do hip hop? Why would they do sober hip hop? Much less. But just talking to Jeff over there, Jeff Morad, it just so happened that the biggest response they ever got from like a live event, like charity drive, was for a treatment center. Like who knows those things? Just those crazy serendipitous coincidences. And they'd been looking for a hip hop show. And just by showing up, I was able to do that. Just by showing up, I was able to be on this like Funk Flex unsigned cipher that I just did a little while back. And Funk Flex, he's this DJ who's been in it since the 80s. And, not to flex too much, no play on words, but I've been watching his online freestyle series for the past 10 years. And like, it's on YouTube, I see all my favorite rappers there. And, I thought that, I had a shot at like fame and clout and all that stuff back in the day when I was paying to record with rappers like Mac Miller and Project Pat and Raekwon from Wu-Tang. And, they respected my work. But even though they themselves, rest in peace to Mac from addiction, they themselves use drugs. I had one rapper tell me back in the day, you need to slow down on them drugs. And that was crazy because I thought, well, what is this? And it just goes to show that the point is, my heart was not in the right place when I was there. I was using drugs to escape. And even people who were in the rap game could tell that I wasn't at a point where I was ready to do it. So no matter what your passion is, be it an applied trade like carpentry, art, music, academics, anything, if there's ever a point in your life where you need to hit that reset button, take some time to work on yourself, don't be afraid to do that. Because if I'm not sober and I'm not clean, and for everybody, it's not addiction. Some people it's trauma and mental health. If I'm not centered, if I don't have my inner sense of approval, and I'm not living my life in a way that's in line with my principles and moving forward and resilient and staying with that same message I hope I heard in that treatment center, I'm not going to be able to accomplish my goals because I'm not going to be in a position where I have the skills and confidence necessary to do it. So that's what this next song is about. It's not about how you're a bad person if you don't, abide by these principles of reaching out for help and being honest and all this. It's harder to live that way. It's harder to lie. It's harder to not be accountable. It's more work to not show up. And I really wish someone had told me that back in the day, instead of guilt tripping me about being a bad person, having a moral failing for using drugs and being shy and not being willing. It was just fear. It was a lot of fear. It was a lot of pain, but it does not have to be that way. There are people out there who work at community treatment centers, who work at community organizations. Sometimes they're in our own neighborhoods, and they're people who we trust, who we're able to reach out to. And I know it's corny and, it's all that, but look, I've been out there on the block in the Tenderloin, 2 p.m. at night with the people, holding pistols, doing their thing, holding court. And I used to think this stuff was corny, but let me tell you something. Going to jail for a DUI is corny. Going to jail for crack possession and not caring about what happens to you is corny. And living your life and not having to pay a dealer $300 to feel okay in the morning because you're living your life in the right way that's getting you on the right path, that's not corny. That's life, and it deserves to be celebrated. So with that, I'm gonna leave y'all off with this song. This is called Living My Life, and I dedicate this to the collaborative and all the amazing work that they're doing.
So people ask me how I was able to get sober and start living life a different way. And I tell them, I just try to be honest and live life one day at a time to the best of my ability. Cause it's harder to tell lies and run from the truth than it is to face it. I'm living my life, I don't have to cave to the pressure, I don't have to stay living reckless, I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders just like it's a chain and a necklace. Don't have to turn to a substance, don't have to try to be perfect, long as I know that I'm worth it. Whenever I feel my anxiety surging, I channel my pain into purpose because I'm just living my life. Some days I wake up, I'm stressing, some days I deal with depression, some days I harbor aggression for others and can't really deal with the pressure, but still I'm just living my life. I ask for help when I need it, I never try to be perfect, I know that I got a purpose in life, but I give myself time cause I know I deserve it, and still I'm just living my life. I tell the truth cause it's harder to lie, turn from the darkness and walk to the light cause it's hard to be seen but it's harder to hide. Turn to my family who offer support, communicate openly, build a rapport. Turn to the people I trust in my circle whenever I feel like I'm lost or unsure. I'm living my life, I don't have to cave to the pressure, I don't have to stay living reckless, I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders just like it's a chain or a necklace. I don't have to turn to a substance, I don't have to try to be perfect, long as I know that I'm worth it. Whenever I feel my anxiety surging, I channel my pain into purpose because I'm just living my life. I've learned to turn to my neighbors and asking for help. I try to be strong and to handle my business, but I know I can't do it all by myself. I speak my mind and I tell them what matters to me. I don't leave my thoughts up on a shelf. I use my talents to build up the place where I live, and I show up when I say I will. Go out my way to help people whenever I can, and I volunteer using my skills. I build up feelings of confidence, safety by positive thinking and power of will. I set my boundaries clear and concise. I didn't used to, but I paid the price. Let people know when I'm comfortable and when I'm not, and I lay it out real and precise. Stick to the script and I stay in my lane. Keep moving forward, I strive and I gain. I fill my circle with positive people cause they hold me down when I'm trying to maintain. I fill my time up with working toward all of my passions cause structure is keeping me sane. I stay creative and focused and humble. I keep it real cause it's simple and plain. I'm living my life, I don't have to cave to the pressure, I don't have to stay living reckless, I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders just like it's a chain and a necklace. I don't have to turn to a substance, don't have to try to be perfect, long as I know that I'm worth it. Whenever I feel my anxiety surging, I channel my pain into purpose. I put the work in to learn every day. I can't stay stagnant and stuck in a cage. Open a book and I build myself up with the knowledge I find written out on the page. Treat others fairly regardless of race. Love is a value that's hard to replace. Acting responsible, using restraint. I'm honest cause life can get hard if you ain't. Setting my plans and I'm making decisions. Don't turn to anger or hurtful derision. I show respect to the people around me regardless of culture or creed or religion. solve all my conflicts and build up resistance. Channel my power through acts of persistence. I build my self-esteem up and I follow my purpose wherever it leads my existence. I keep a positive view of my personal future. I cannot be a statistic. Living my life and I'm moving intelligent. I see my chance and I don't want to miss it. I keep a positive view of my personal future, cause I cannot be a statistic. Living my life and I'm moving intelligent. I see my chance and I don't want to miss it. I'm living my life. I don't have to cave to the pressure. I don't have to stay living reckless. I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders just like it's a chain or a necklace. Don't have to turn to a substance. Don't have to try to be perfect. Long as I know that I'm worth it. Whenever I feel my anxiety surging, I channel my pain into purpose. I'm living my life. This song's dedicated to the collaborative and anybody out there struggling, trying to live their life one day at a time. It gets easier as long as you're willing to ask for help and work towards the solution.
Wow. Wow. What an incredible anthem of hope for our community. And Benjamin, we are so grateful and thankful to you for so selflessly and bravely sharing of yourself this afternoon. Now, we're very grateful for everyone that is here. And just a note, a very human mistake in this time when we are hopefully offering some grace to one another. I inadvertently used the wrong Zoom account to host this event. And so only 100 individuals were allowed in from the waiting room. And there is over 100 individuals that were waiting in the waiting room or that I received emails from. So this recording will be available for those individuals who were not able to attend live. But just know that this was a very exciting event for a lot of people, and I humbly apologize for using the wrong Zoom account. The collaborative is so grateful to the many community partners who have made this afternoon possible, especially Old Mill Road Media, Stratton Mountain, Magic Mountain, Viking Nordic, and Riley Rink. And if you are interested in finding out more about what we do, please head over to the Collaborative's website at www.thecollaborative.us for more information. And if you would like to find more information we're sharing in the chat right now about Benjamin, please head on over to his website and remember to listen to his radio show entitled Clean Jams on WEQX at 11 p.m. on Thursdays. It's great. It's a really great and not to be missed show. And so right now we have some time for question and answer. And the way that you can do that is by sending a question in the chat if you would like, and we can have Benjamin share a little bit. So first question, is that okay? Is that all right with everyone?
Why not?
Awesome. Okay, so first question that is coming in, Benjamin, is what is the hardest thing for you about staying in recovery? What's the most challenging thing?
Simultaneously staying in the moment without losing sight of the past. And like I said in the beginning, like I refer to myself as an addict in long-term recovery because that's both. I understand that I have a tendency to hide and to use self-destructive mechanisms of coping, but I'm not limited by it. In fact, it fuels me because by understanding that I have those tendencies, I can use them to fuel my forward progression. And there's a saying in my sobriety fellowship, you know, as I said before, neither regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And it's not because I want to glorify my past or praise myself for the mistakes that I made because I was afraid and in pain and hiding. It's just that if you forget your history, you're destined to repeat it. And I have to stay humble and accountable to the fact that I am capable of doing these things. And if I just think I'm holier than thou because I got a couple days, months, years, decades, centuries, if we get to that cryogenic future point clean, I'm gonna lose it. So it's just being able to live chemical free, but at the same time centered, which requires a lot of practice, a lot of breathing. And I could get more into that with the meditation and spiritual part, but I'm not going to do all that. I'm just going to say whatever you have to do to maintain your emotional equilibrium, stay in the solution while still remembering where you come from. which isn't always easy. But I find that as long as I'm willing to ask people for help, ask them how they do it. Just talk to people. Get through my most anxious moments. It gives me the clarity and ease to understand that, it's okay to have anxiety. It's okay to have pain. And I shouldn't hide it. I shouldn't feel weak for having it. I should feel, entitled to share it and heal with other people by sharing it with them, so we can share the burden and share the growth together. So that's how I try to keep it. And that's probably the toughest thing about living in sobriety and recovery.
Yeah. In our Refuse to Use registration, Benjamin, we asked the question of our young people, what is one of the biggest reasons that you think young people engage in substance use? And so I have a question. What advice that just came through the chat do you have for teens to retain their resilience when peer pressure is actually a really big consideration?
Find something you like and do it, because, a lot of people love approval regardless of their age. And look, if you love approval, there's nothing wrong with you. Everybody does. It's a human emotion. It's a human need. And just like, I'm in recovery, but there's people who can have like a beer and have a joint and the world doesn't end for them. But that's not me. And there's people who can, seek out approval or be in a dependent relationship and the world doesn't end for them. But that's not it for me. And so what I would say is there are healthy ways to get approval and healthy ways to get a rush of dopamine and endorphin. And I would just chase those. And I would also say that, although total abstinence and, prevention is the goal, if you slip up, I tell you the same thing I'll tell people from the jump in a recovery program. Keep coming back. Don't isolate yourselves from positive friends you don't use because you're using. Don't do that. Like, stay in a place where you are okay with going back to positive behaviors. And another thing is find what you love and do that. Like, when I was growing up, even though I drank and smoked, one of the things that saved me was my love for music. Because at every stage, like when I went to the party, like, even though I was a budding alcoholic, the thing I lived for wasn't the drink. If there were people who were rapping at the party, it was like, I'm going to go freestyle with them. And I would put the drink down to go to do that. And I really wish that I would have just gone to the studio and not gone to the party in the first place. But I was too afraid to not fit in. So what I would say is, if you're at a party and, there's people doing whatever, and you think, man, I would really like to be drawing, fishing, working in my wood shop, working in my metal shop, like learning how to fix cars for my dad, doing whatever, do that. And you can still hang with your friends after. You don't have to stay in a situation where you don't want to be. And if you are in a situation where you're getting really drunk and really high to escape your pain, there's no judgment. It's just you might want to take a minute to be like, wow, why am I doing this? What's hurting me? What's underneath this? Because usually if there's excessive substance use, it's not judging anybody, but there's something underneath it that you're trying to hide and self-medicate. And there's no shame in that. There's only joy in moving forward, because you can ask someone for help and you don't have to get to the point I got to. Help is out there. So just ask for help, focus on doing what you love. Sorry. And if you do slip up for whatever reason, is it good? Maybe not, but it's not the end of the world, and help's always out there.
Thank you. And that notion of harm reduction and of seeking out help. And really, it is a skill. It's a skill, and one that we are going to work on this year. And we just had someone ask just your thoughts on how do loved ones help or set boundaries and sort of live with people who are not ready to engage in that recovery process. How do you love people while setting boundaries who are maybe going through these struggles?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, obviously there's the ABCs, don't give them money, don't make it so that they have access to going anywhere. But, people can hustle and the dope man delivers. So at the end of the day, it's not all about, you can't prevent that from happening purely by circumstantial punishment or whatever. I think what it really comes down to is you can't make someone ready to change, but you can have open ears and an open heart and read the signs. And, there were plenty of times where I was dope sick, where if my family had come to me and said, do you not want to be sick anymore? Are you ready to go into treatment? probably would have said yes, but they don't know that. And I'm not, vulnerable or ready to be vulnerable enough to do that. So if someone's acting harmful or acting out of pocket and they're creating a destructive dynamic, close yourself off from it in whatever way you can. I mean, I know it's tough because, if it's someone who's younger or someone who has, mental health issues often accompanies it. It's a complex issue. I don't claim to have all the answers. But one thing I do know is that wherever the person's at, as long as you remain open to the solution and willing to accept them for where they're at, even if you're not happy about it, just having that knowledge and that awareness. Because if someone is, stealing, manipulating, doing whatever, awareness of that without anger, because it's part of the disease, you can say, you can't stay here anymore. There are programs out there, get help when you need it. And that's a form of love. And then a form of love is when that same person shows up at the door and wants to come back, you say, no, but here's the number for a treatment center. Let's work on this. I'll drive you to Turning Point, whatever. There's a bunch of organizations, Savita, any of those spoke places. And we'll get you some help. So be willing to get people help, be willing to set healthy boundaries, and be willing to ask, because just like it takes courage for people to be vulnerable enough to admit that they have an addiction, who are living with addiction, it takes a lot of courage for someone to ask if someone has an addiction, because that's also exposing you. It's making you vulnerable. And I understand that. Parents are afraid to know the truth sometimes because they don't want to know it. Run towards the truth. Ask them. Because even if they might not tell you the whole honest truth, body language sometimes doesn't lie. And it's always good to intervene before and get the full story before it's too late.
Yeah. And thank you so much. It's so important that we speak these things, that we speak about these things, and that we talk about it. Now, before we ask you, hopefully, to just do a little freelancing for us, we wonder, do you have any upcoming shows, any upcoming performances? Sort of what's next for you?
Yeah, well, we got a couple of things. Clean Column is every week in Vermont News Guide in 7 Days, Vermont. We got Clean Jams every week. 11 p.m. on 102.7 WEQX for locals. You can also stream on WEQX.com and on cleanjams.com. We got an old library of episodes on the Mixcloud platform. Clean, the album, came out in February of 2020, but it's on all the streaming services, Spotify, all that, iTunes, Apple Music. We got a couple YouTube videos for anyone who wants to check out the music. We just did one for Recovery is Possible, the second to last one. And we're probably going to put the MP3 up for the new song, Living My Life, if that's all right with you. We'd love to put that up, and maybe the video too. Who knows? Probably just the MP3, but time will tell. And as far as future projects and future performances, I have a very exciting gig with the Indie Collaborative. COVID, who knows? But we are excited, and it's slated for Carnegie Hall in New York, kind of playing on my classical roots in April of 2022. And that should be a fun performance. I have the Funkmaster Flex Unsigned Cypher video coming out on YouTube soon. Very excited about that. That's a dream come true. Just power recovery, power living in the solution. I rap about recovery when I go on there. And not to be too real, but a lot of other people there, they use drugs and they respected it. And it was crazy that I was able to talk about recovery and the coronavirus pandemic and the dangers of addiction. And they were open to it, because there's a saying, from one of my favorite rappers, which Project Pat, who I worked with back in the day, real recognizes real. And so we were able to go across those boundaries, and hopefully that'll translate to the Indie Collaborative thing too, because there's a lot of different artists there at Carnegie Hall, folk, dance, EDM, rock, rap, and I'm going to be doing classical piano rap. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited for it. Looking forward to other performances too.
Awesome. Really excited to see what the future holds and brings for you. But we are really, really grateful for the song that you wrote for the collaborative, Living My Life. It's a perfect example of what we intend to do this year and for many years to come, really focusing on the skills necessary to lead happy and healthy lives for yourself and your future. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. It's okay. Just always, I love what you say, Benjamin, just run towards the truth. Just run towards the truth. And it would be really awesome if you would gift us with some just nothing prepared, just from your brain right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be honest and say, I prepared a little Eminem 8 Mile verse, and I got it, but I'm not gonna do that. I'll be honest. I'll just do an off the dome freestyle just for fun. Used to be the cannabis, the hash color amethyst. Then I had the cataclysmic challenges. Then I had to see it. Then I had to switch the balances. Now I spit freely, regardless of what my talents is. You can be a carpenter. You can be an arbiter or artist. You don't have to be the most gifted or be the smartest. You can just be the person who knows where their heart is. And you don't have to be an actor like Josh Hartnett. You don't have to be a star like Miley Cyrus. You don't have to spread viral like coronavirus. You just have to look yourself directly in your iris and know that you a star regardless of whether or not you got a stylist.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being part of us kicking off the Refuse to Use 2021 season. We are so grateful to everyone who has been here, especially the youth. And again, thank you to those individuals that tried to get in today, over 100. We are very grateful to everyone. RTU participants, you will be sent an email at some point with some follow-up questions to answer about today's performance to get attendance. We are very, very grateful for you being here and joining us on this journey this year. Thank you to those community members who showed up to support. We all have a stake in this. We all have a stake in the healthy development of youth in our community. So thank you so much all for being here. Have a great evening.